At midnight, I heard the key turn. My son-in-law said, "Don't fight it. It only makes it worse." And that night, I understood that hell can live under the same roof as you. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Eleanor Miller. I'm 67 years old. For the last 5 years, I have lived, or rather survived, in a dark room at the back of my daughter Juliet's house in a suburb of Cleveland called Maple Creek. When my husband, Frank, died of a massive heart attack while working in his welding shop, she was the only one of my 3 children who offered me a place to live. "You'll be better here, Mom," she promised me on that rainy October afternoon, as I shivered from cold and grief at the wake. "Don't you worry about a thing. Ed and I will take care of you." I believed her. Dear God, how I believed her. My wrinkled hands clung to hers as if they were my lifeline in the middle of a shipwreck. But that night, March 15th, that damn night, I learned that hell can take the shape of a family. It was exactly 12 o'clock. The old grandfather clock in the living room chimed midnight with its slow, heavy gongs, as if announcing a tragedy. I was lying in the narrow, sagging bed they had given me, covered by a single thin blanket that smelled of dampness and neglect. The room reeked of mold. The walls had water stains that looked like frozen tears, and the only window faced a dirty brick wall where the sun never reached. I heard the key turn in the lock from the outside, that cold metallic sound that had become the soundtrack to my confinement. But this time was different. This time, the door opened. I sat up with difficulty. My bones don't obey me like they used to. Arthritis eats at my joints like a slow fire. And then I saw him. It wasn't Juliet. It was Ed, her husband. He walked in without a word, closing the door behind him with a soft but threatening click. The hallway light seeped in for just a second before everything was plunged back into shadows. Only the weak yellow light from the bare bulb hanging from the ceiling allowed me to see his silhouette. "What? What are you doing in here, Ed?" I asked, instinctively pulling the blanket up to my neck. My voice sounded broken, like glass about to shatter. He approached with slow, calculated steps. His eyes were glassy from alcohol and something else. Something that chilled my blood. Rage. Contempt. A coldness I had never seen directed at me. "Don't fight it, Eleanor," he said in a low, hoarse voice like a growl. "It only makes it worse." "I'm sorry?" The air caught in my throat. My heart started beating so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. "Don't you get it? You're a burden here," he continued, getting closer. The smell of stale beer and cigarettes radiated from his clothes like a toxic cloud. "You're only here out of pity. Not even your own daughter wants you. It would be best for everyone if you just disappeared." I felt the floor open up beneath my feet, as if my whole world was collapsing at once. The words hit me harder than any slap. "Get out of my room, Ed! I'm begging you!" I screamed, but my voice came out as a desperate whisper. Tears began to roll down my wrinkled cheeks, hot and salty. He laughed, a dry, cruel laugh that echoed off the damp walls like a nightmare. "Your room?" he scoffed, gesturing around dismissively. "Ma'am, none of this is yours. Not the bed, not the roof, not even your daughter. You have nothing, you understand? Nothing. And if you keep bothering us, screwing up our lives with your complaints and your crying, I swear to God I'll put you in one of those state-run homes where forgotten people go to die." He shoved me back onto the bed with a violence that left me breathless. My frail body bounced on the mattress like a rag doll. He turned to leave, but before walking out, he looked back one last time. "And don't even think about telling Juliet about this, because if you do, you know what's coming." The door slammed shut. I heard the key turn in the lock again from the outside, and I was left there, trembling in the dark, feeling the walls slowly closing in on me. I didn't sleep that night, nor the ones that followed. I lay there, staring at the stained ceiling, remembering when this same man used to call me his favorite mother-in-law and hug me at Christmas. Remembering when Juliet introduced me as the best mom in the world. How had I gotten here? How had I gone from being the woman who broke her back raising her children to being a burden, an inconvenience to be hidden at the back of the house like a shameful secret? The dawn came gray and cold through that useless window, and I was still there, with the bitter taste of humiliation in my mouth and a question burning inside me. How much longer could I endure this? Because something deep in my soul told me that night was only the beginning. The following days were a silent nightmare. Ed had planted a seed of terror in my chest that grew with every hour, every minute. Whenever I heard his footsteps in the hall, my body would tense up as if bracing for a blow. But what hurt most wasn't my fear of him. It was Juliet's complicit silence, because she knew. She had to know. One morning, when they brought me breakfast, a piece of stale toast and a cup of watery coffee, I dared to bring it up. "Honey," I said in a trembling voice as she left the tray on the nightstand without looking at me, "I need to talk to you." "About what, Mom?" she replied with that coldness that had become her usual tone with me. She didn't even turn around. She stood with her back to me, organizing some pill bottles. "About Ed. He came into my room last night and—" "And what?" she interrupted, finally turning to me. Her eyes, which once sparkled when she saw me, now looked at me with exhaustion, as if I were a spoiled child making up stories. "He threatened me, Juliet. He said horrible things. He pushed me and—" "Oh, Mom," she sighed, bringing a hand to her forehead in a theatrical gesture. "Here we go again with your stories. Ed worked late last night. He got home after 2 in the morning and went straight to bed. I was awake waiting for him. But honey, I swear to you that—" "Enough!" she shouted, and her voice cracked against the walls like a whip. "I am sick of your lies. Every day you invent something new to get attention. First we don't feed you, then we treat you badly. Now Ed is bothering you. What's next? That we hit you." I fell silent. The tears rolled down my cheeks, and I couldn't stop them. Because in her eyes I saw no confusion or concern. I saw something much worse. I saw that she didn't believe me because she didn't want to. "Look, Mom," she continued, lowering her voice but maintaining the hardness that was breaking my heart. "I get that you're lonely, that you miss Dad, but you can't keep causing problems in this house. Ed is a good man, a good father, and I won't let you slander him with your fabrications." She stormed out of the room, slamming the door. The sound of the lock turning was like a death sentence. I sat there on the edge of the bed, holding the cold coffee cup in my trembling hands. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if I was truly losing my mind. If all of this was a product of my tired mind, of my heart broken by widowhood. But then I remembered the pressure of his hands when he pushed me, the smell of alcohol on his breath, the cruelty in his words. No, that had been real as the pain now searing through my chest. That afternoon, listening to my grandchildren play in the yard, I began to remember, to review every moment since I arrived at this house 5 years ago. And I realized the signs had been there all along, but I had chosen not to see them. The first time Ed disrespected me was 6 months after Frank's death. We had just finished dinner. I had made pot roast, Juliet's favorite since she was a little girl, and he complained that it was too dry. "At your age, Eleanor, you should know how to cook without making people choke," he'd said, pushing his plate to the center of the table with contempt. Juliet had laughed. A nervous, uncomfortable laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. And I, as always, had remained silent. I had taken his plate without a word, swallowing the humiliation like bitter medicine. Then came the comments about my appearance. "Aren't you going to fix yourself up a little, Mom? You look like you're homeless." Or about my expenses. "This woman spends more on her pills than we do on groceries." Or about my presence. "Why is she always in the living room when my friends come over? Doesn't she have anywhere else to be?" Each comment was like a drop of poison accumulating in my soul. And the worst part was that Juliet never defended me. On the contrary, sometimes she would even join in his teasing with an embarrassed smile, as if apologizing to him for having such a difficult mother. I also remembered all the times I helped them when they had financial trouble. When Ed lost his job at the law firm, I took out my savings, the little I'd managed to scrape together selling homemade pies at the West Side Market, so they could make their mortgage payment. It was $5,000 that represented years of waking up at 4 in the morning to make dough, years of back pain and burned hands. "It's a loan, Mom," Juliet had told me. "We'll pay you back as soon as Ed finds a new job." That was 3 years ago. They never paid back a single dollar. And the one time I mentioned it, Ed looked at me with that smirk and said, "How could it be a loan? You gave us that money as a gift. That's what mothers are for, right? To help their kids." I also remembered when I took care of my grandchildren during the bad case of pneumonia they had last winter. It was 2 weeks without sleep, giving them medicine every 4 hours, changing cold cloths on their foreheads, holding them when they cried so their parents could rest. I got sick myself, but it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that Sebastian and Sophia got better. And how did they thank me? When the kids recovered, Ed told Juliet it was better if the kids didn't get too used to Grandma, because they won't want to do anything on their own. From then on, I saw my grandchildren less and less. At first, it was small excuses. They had homework, they were tired, maybe another day. Then, they simply stopped bringing them to me. I would hear them laughing in the yard, but when I appeared, they would be sent to their rooms. One afternoon, Sophia, who was only 6, snuck away and came to my room. She climbed onto my bed and hugged me with those skinny little arms that smelled like baby shampoo. "Grandma, why don't you play with me anymore?" she asked with those huge eyes that looked so much like Juliet's when she was a little girl. "Because your mommy and daddy say you're very busy, my love," I answered, stroking her brown hair. "But I'm not busy. I want you to tell me stories like you used to." Just then, Juliet appeared, furious. "Sophia, what have I told you about coming in here without permission?" she scolded, grabbing her arm with more force than necessary. "Come here right now." "But Mommy, I want to be with Grandma." "No, Grandma is sick and needs to rest. Let's go." And she took her away. That was the last time I held my grandchildren. From then on, when they saw me by chance in the hallway or the kitchen, they would look at me with a mixture of curiosity and fear, as if I were a dangerous stranger living in their house. That night, lying in my bed that felt more like a prison cell every day, I remembered the words my mother told me on my wedding day. "Daughter, never forget that family is all we have in this world. Take care of your children, but also demand that they take care of you. Because the day you allow them to disrespect you, that's the day you stop being their mother and become their servant." At what point had I stopped being Juliet's mother and become a burden? At what point had my unconditional love turned into a weakness they could exploit without consequences? The clock chimed another midnight, and I was still awake, feeling the weight of so many years of silence crushing my chest. Because I had understood something terrible. I wasn't going crazy. The problem was that I had been sane all along, but had chosen to close my eyes to the truth that my own daughter had allowed me to be turned into a prisoner in my own refuge. The days grew darker after that conversation with Juliet. It was as if they had decided it wasn't even worth pretending to respect me anymore. The meals started arriving later, colder and smaller. Sometimes it was just a piece of hard tortilla with refried beans that already had a crust on them. Other times, nothing. "I forgot," Juliet would say when I asked about food at 3 in the afternoon. "I thought you'd already eaten." How could I have eaten if I'd been locked in since the night before? One Thursday morning, I remember because it was the day I always heard the cleaning lady arrive, I woke up with a terrible pain in my chest. It was like a huge stone was pressing on my ribs, making it hard to breathe. I staggered to my feet and knocked on the door. "Juliet! Honey, help me!" I shouted with what little voice I had left. "My chest hurts so much." No one answered. I kept knocking, growing more desperate. The pain was spreading to my left arm, and I started to get really scared. What if it was my heart? What if I was having a heart attack like Frank? "Please, somebody," I begged, pounding the door with my fists until my knuckles ached. After what felt like hours, I heard footsteps. The door opened, and Juliet appeared, but not alone. Ed was behind her, arms crossed, with that look of annoyance that had become permanent whenever he saw me. "What is it now?" Juliet asked without coming closer, as if she were afraid of catching something. "My chest hurts badly, honey. I think I need to see a doctor," I told her, holding onto the doorframe because my legs were shaking. Ed chuckled. "A doctor? And with what money, ma'am? You think Medicare is free?" "But I have my card," I protested weakly. "I have the right—" "Yes, but we have to take you, lose a day of work, spend money on gas," Juliet interrupted. "And for what, Mom?" It's always the same with you. Everything hurts. Everything bothers you. We can't just run to the hospital every time you feel sick. Honey, please. I really feel very sick. Have some chamomile tea and rest, Ed said with that cruel smile I knew so well. At your age, all aches and pains are normal. Or almost all of them, he added, looking at me with an intensity that froze my blood. They closed the door. I just stood there, clutching my chest with both hands, feeling the physical pain mix with something much worse. The certainty that if I died in that room, it would take them days to notice. I dragged myself to the bed and lay on my side, trying to find a position that hurt less. I closed my eyes and prayed, not to be healed, but for the strength to endure one more day. The chest pain went away after 2 days, but something deeper inside me had broken. It was as if I had crossed an invisible line. I was no longer their sick mother. I was their problem, their burden, their shame. That's when what I call the time of forgetting began. Because Juliet developed a very selective memory for everything related to me. She would forget to give me the blood pressure pills the doctor had prescribed. Oh, it totally slipped my mind. I'll give them to you tomorrow. Tomorrow became the day after tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow became next week. She would forget to tell me when visitors were coming so I wouldn't come out of my room in my robe and slippers. But when a relative saw me and asked why I looked so gaunt, then she would remember to scold me in front of everyone. It's just that Mom doesn't take care of herself like she used to. You know how the elderly get. She forgot to tell me they had changed the home phone number, so when my sister Hope called from Pittsburgh to see how I was, they were told the number was no longer in service. Hope thought I had moved and didn't try to contact me again, but what hurt the most was that she forgot my birthdays, the holidays, the dates we used to celebrate together. Mother's Day passed without so much as a Happy Mother's Day. My 67th birthday came and went like any other day. Christmas was just a murmur of laughter and music coming from the living room, while I ate a cold sandwich in my room because there wasn't enough room at the table for everyone. One night, I heard guests arrive. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. It was a Friday, and apparently they were celebrating something. The smell of the barbecue Ed was making in the backyard wafted into my room and made my stomach roar. I had only eaten saltine crackers since breakfast. I gathered my courage and went out. In the living room were Ed's brothers with their wives, some neighbors, and even Mr. Russo, Frank's old army buddy who had always been fond of me. Seeing me, Mr. Russo stood up immediately. "Eleanor, how are you? It's been so long since I've seen you." "I'm okay, Mr. Russo, getting by," I replied, trying to smile even though I was embarrassed for him to see me in such a state. I was wearing an old robe and my hair was a mess because no one had told me we were having company. Sit," he said, offering me his chair. "Have you eaten?" Ed made some delicious barbecue. Before I could answer, Juliet appeared like a bolt of lightning. "Oh, Mom, what are you doing out here?" she said with a forced smile. "You're in your pajamas. Go get changed, please." "But honey, I'm hungry. I'll bring you something to your room in a bit," she interrupted, grabbing my arm with more force than necessary. "Mr. Russo, please excuse her. Mom's been a little confused lately. You know how age is." Mr. Russo looked at me with concern, but I no longer had the strength to protest. I let her lead me back to my room like a scolded child. The food never came. The next day, Mr. Russo came specifically to see me. He knocked on my door and said he wanted to talk to me. Juliet flatly refused. "She can't have visitors, Mr. Russo. Her health is very delicate, and the doctor says she needs absolute rest." She lied shamelessly. "But she looked fine yesterday. It was just a moment of lucidity. Believe me, it's for the best." From my window, I saw Mr. Russo walk to his car, shaking his head sadly. He was the last connection I had to my old life, to the people who knew me as more than just a burden. That night, I cried like I hadn't cried since Frank's funeral. But these tears were different. I wasn't crying for my husband's death. I was crying for my own death in life, because I had realized something terrible. They were slowly erasing me from the world, cutting my connections, isolating me, making me disappear without actually killing me. It was a silent murder, a social execution that left no fingerprints or bodies, only living ghosts locked in rooms at the back of houses. One morning, Listening to Ed's snores coming from the master bedroom, I got up and went to the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Her hair was white and dirty, her skin gray like old newspaper, her eyes sunken and dull. Her cheeks were so thin that my bones stood out like knives. What had happened to Eleanor Miller? Where was the woman who had raised 3 children working day and night? Where was the one who had been strong enough to haul bags of cement to help build her own house? Where was the one who had faced down school principals when her kids were in trouble? Who had nursed the sick without rest? Who had been the pillar of her family for decades? That woman was gone. In her place was this trembling shadow who had to ask permission even to use the bathroom. I touched my reflection in the cracked glass and whispered the words that would change everything. No more. Those 2 words I had whispered to the mirror, no more, rang in my head for days like a bell that wouldn't stop tolling. For the first time in years, I had said something born of my own will, not my fear, but the gap between thinking it and doing it was as wide as a canyon. At first, my rebellions were small, almost invisible. When they brought me breakfast, if you could call a cold tortilla with a sliver of cheese breakfast, I didn't say, "Thank you," as I always did. I stayed silent, looking Juliet straight in the eye with something I hadn't felt in a long time, dignity. She noticed the change immediately. "Aren't you going to say thank you?" she asked in that patronizing voice she used, as if speaking to a misbehaving child. "For what?" I replied, and my own voice surprised me. It sounded firmer than it had in months. "What do you mean, for what?" "For the food I'm bringing you." "Is this food?" I asked, pointing to the plate. "Because even stray dogs get fed better than this." Juliet's jaw dropped. It was the first time in years I had talked back to her like that. Her eyes filled with rage, but also something else. Surprise. As if a piece of furniture had just spoken. "How dare you?" she yelled. "After everything we've done for you. You ungrateful. Everything you've done for me," I repeated, getting out of bed with difficulty but with resolve. "You mean locking me up like an animal? Denying me food when you forget? Forbidding me from seeing my grandchildren? Humiliating me in front of guests? You're crazy, completely crazy," she screamed, but her voice was different. It no longer had that characteristic confidence. There was a hint of panic in it. "No, honey. I was crazy when I let all this happen. Now I'm getting my sanity back." She stormed out, slamming the door, but this time she didn't lock it. She had forgotten. Or maybe the shock had confused her so much that she couldn't focus on her jailer routine. I waited a few minutes and very slowly, I turned the knob. The door opened. The hallway stretched before me like a tunnel to freedom. My legs trembled, not from fear, but from excitement. How long had it been since I was last able to leave that room whenever I wanted? I walked to the kitchen, each step a small victory. The linoleum floor felt cool under my bare feet, the first pleasant sensation I'd had in weeks. In the kitchen, I found something that made me cry. The refrigerator was full. There was ham, cheese, fruit, vegetables, fresh milk, everything I had been denied for so long. With trembling hands, I made myself a real sandwich. Fresh bread, ham, cheese, tomato, lettuce. I put mayonnaise and even a little avocado on it. It was as if I were rediscovering flavors after months of subsisting on crumbs. As I ate, standing in the kitchen, savoring every bite as if it were my last, I heard voices from Juliet's room. She was on the phone and her voice carried to where I stood. "I don't know what's wrong with her, Ed. She's acting so weird. She was so rude to me and refused to thank me for her food. Yes, I think she's finally losing it completely. No, I didn't lock it. I forgot. What do you mean, what are we going to do? The same thing we've been planning for a while. It's time." My blood ran cold. What had they been planning? For how long? Ed's words from that night echoed in my mind. "I swear I'll put you in a home where forgotten people go to die." I finished my sandwich quickly and went back to my room, closing the door softly. But I didn't lie down in bed like an invalid anymore. I sat in the only chair in the room, straightened my back, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. An hour later, Juliet returned with Ed. They both wore the serious expressions they put on when they were about to deliver bad news. But this time, I was waiting for them. "Mom, We need to talk, Juliet said, but not with her usual authority. There was a nervousness in her voice. I'm listening, I replied, without getting up from the chair, without looking away. Ed, as always, got straight to the point. Look, Eleanor, we've been thinking, and we believe you need specialized care. There are some very nice places where they can take better care of you than we can. Places? I asked, though I already knew exactly what he meant. A nursing home, Juliet said quickly. A very nice, clean one, with nurses on duty 24/7, activities, people your own age. Ah, I said, nodding slowly. A home. It's not a home, Mom. It's a senior living community, Juliet protested, but her eyes couldn't meet mine. And when did you decide this? I asked with a calmness that surprised even me. Well, it's just that, Juliet stammered, searching for words. We've been seeing for a while that you're very confused. Ed interrupted. The things you make up, the baseless complaints, the aggression from today, you clearly need professional help. I stood up from the chair very slowly. My joints protested, but I managed to stand with dignity. I looked at them both, these two beings who had been my family and who now looked like strangers in front of me. You know what? I said, my voice coming out stronger than I expected. You're right. They both blinked, surprised by my answer. Really? Juliet asked. Yes. You're right that I'm confused, but not in the way you think. I'm confused because I don't understand how I could have raised such a cruel daughter. I'm confused because I don't know when my unconditional love became a weakness. I'm confused because I thought family was about protecting each other, not destroying each other. Mom, don't exaggerate. I'm not finished, I shouted, and my voice roared through the house like a wounded lioness. You're right that I need help, but not the kind you're thinking of. I need help understanding how I allowed myself to be treated like a nuisance when I was the one who gave you life, who worked day and night so you could have a future, who taught you values you obviously never learned. Ed took a step toward me with that threatening expression I knew so well. Watch what you say, old woman. Or what? I challenged him, for the first time in my life looking at him without fear. Are you going to hit me? Are you going to push me again? Go ahead. But this time, do it loudly, so the neighbors can see what kind of man you are. He stopped in his tracks. For the first time, I saw him hesitate, saw him back down. You know what, Ed? I continued. You're right about one thing. I should leave here, but not to where you want to send me. I'm going to leave to a place of my choosing, when I choose, and how I choose. Juliet started to cry, but they were no longer tears that moved me. They were the tears of a manipulator who sees she's losing control. Mom, please don't say these things. We love you. We just want what's best for you. If you loved me, I said, stepping closer until I was inches from her face, you wouldn't have me locked up like a prisoner. If you loved me, you wouldn't deny me food and medicine. If you loved me, you wouldn't keep me from my grandchildren. If you loved me, you wouldn't be planning to get rid of me like I'm trash. I walked toward the door, but before leaving, I turned back one last time. Tomorrow, I'm calling my sister Hope. I'm going to tell her exactly how you've treated me. And I'm also going to call Mr. Russo and Mrs. Chen from the corner store and everyone who knew me before you turned me into this ghost. Mom, you can't... Can't what? Speak? Tell the truth? Get help? Of course I can. And I will. I left the room, and this time, I was the one who closed the door, but not with a key, because I was no longer their prisoner. That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply, not because my future was sorted out, but because I had reclaimed something I had lost. My voice. The next day, everything changed, not just inside me, but throughout the house. It was as if I had thrown a stone into the center of a calm pond, and the ripples just kept expanding. I woke up early, took a hot shower, something I hadn't done in weeks because they always said there was no hot water, and put on my best dress. It was navy blue with little flowers, the one Frank had given me for our 30th anniversary. It was wrinkled from being stored for so long, but it still fit. I combed my hair properly for the first time in months, put on a little blush I found at the bottom of a drawer, and for the first time in a long time, The woman in the mirror looked like the Eleanor I remembered. I walked out of my room at 8 in the morning. Juliet was in the kitchen making breakfast for the kids, moving nervously, dropping things, burning the grilled cheese. When she saw me walk in, she froze, spatula in hand. "Good morning," I said with a smile I hadn't practiced in years. Mom?" she stammered. "What are you doing up so early?" "I'm going out," I replied simply, pouring coffee into a clean mug. "Where to?" "To run some errands," I said, enjoying the look of panic that spread across her face. Sebastian and Sophia came running down the stairs in their school uniforms. When they saw me, they stopped short. It was the first time in months they had seen me out of my room, dressed like a normal person. "Grandma!" Sophia shouted, running toward me with open arms. On instinct, Juliet stepped between us. "Sophia, no. She's sick. She can't hug you." "I'm perfectly fine," I said firmly, kneeling down to be at my granddaughter's level. "And I want to hug you very much, my love." Sophia hugged me with that pure strength only children have, and for a moment I felt my heart fill with a warmth I had forgotten existed. She smelled of baby shampoo and cinnamon cookies. "Grandma, why didn't you come to my school play?" she asked with those big, innocent eyes. "I was a tree and everything." I froze. "What play?" I looked at Juliet, who had gone completely pale. "When was your play, sweetheart?" "Last week. Mommy said you were very sick and couldn't come." Another lie. Another exclusion. Another way to erase me from my grandchildren's lives. "Well, you know what, my love," I said, stroking her hair. "The next time you have something important, I'll be there. I promise." "Really?" Her eyes lit up like two little stars. "Really?" Juliet quickly stepped in. "Kids, you're going to be late for school. Let's go." "But I want to stay with Grandma." "Let's go," Juliet yelled with a desperation that bordered on hysteria. After they left, the house fell silent. Ed had left early, supposedly for work, though I suspected he had fled to avoid facing me after last night. I picked up the phone, one of those old corded phones they had in the living room, and dialed the number I had known since I was a child. My sister Hope's number in Pittsburgh. It rang several times before she answered with that groggy voice of someone who just woke up. "Hello? Hope, it's me. Eleanor." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Eleanor? Sis, where have you been? I called your house 1,000 times and they said the number was disconnected. I thought you had moved or something worse." "Hope," I said, and my voice broke despite all my efforts to stay strong. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to the end without interrupting me." "Of course, sis. What's wrong?" And then I told her everything. Every humiliation, every locked door, every missed meal, every forgotten medication, every night of fear. I told her about Ed coming into my room, about the threats, about how they had isolated me from my grandchildren, about the plan to put me in a home. I told her about the 5 years of silent degradation I had endured. Hope was crying on the other end of the line. I could hear her sobbing as I recounted my ordeal with a surprising calm. "Dear God, Eleanor," she whispered when I finished. "Why didn't you tell me anything sooner?" "Because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want to admit that my own daughter was capable of treating me like this. Because I kept hoping things would change, that she would go back to being the girl I raised. Sis, you have to get out of there immediately. I know. But I need your help. Whatever you need. Absolutely anything." That same day, Hope got on a bus from Pittsburgh to Cleveland. A 6-hour journey to rescue her older sister. In the meantime, I made other calls. I called Mr. Russo, who became furious when I told him the real reason I couldn't see him the other day. "Eleanor, I knew something wasn't right. You looked so scared, so thin. Why didn't you say something?" I called Mrs. Chen from the corner store, who had always been kind to me. She confirmed something I already suspected. Juliet had been telling everyone that I was losing my mind, and that's why they didn't let me go out alone anymore. "People were asking about you, Eleanor. Everyone said they missed you, but your daughter insisted you were in poor mental health. A perfect strategy. If anyone asked about me, they already had the excuse ready. The poor old lady was senile, so they had to watch her closely. Anything I said would be dismissed as the delusions of a sick mind." When Juliet returned from dropping the kids at school, she found me sitting in the living room, dressed to leave, with my purse in my lap. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Waiting," I replied without looking at her. "Waiting for what?" "For my sister. She's coming to get me." She sank into the armchair as if her legs couldn't support her. "Mom, please, we can fix this. We can talk. We already talked yesterday. And the day before. And months ago when I tried to tell you your husband threatened me and you didn't believe me. There's nothing left to talk about, Juliet." "But Mom, you're my mother. You can't just leave like this." "Oh, so now I'm your mother?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Because yesterday it seemed I was just a burden you wanted to get rid of. I never said that. Not with words, but with actions, with silence, with looks, with locked doors." She cried. She cried like I hadn't seen her cry since she was a little girl, but they were no longer tears that broke my heart. They were the tears of someone who had lost something she took for granted would always be there. "Forgive me, Mom. Please, forgive me." "I forgive you, honey," I said, and I meant it. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it definitely doesn't mean staying. When the taxi pulled up to the house and I saw Hope get out with that determination she had always possessed, I knew my life was about to change forever. Hope came in like a hurricane. She looked at Juliet with the contempt reserved for the worst kind of people, and then she looked at me with a love so pure it made me cry. "Ready, sis?" "More than ready." I didn't take much. Just my medications, some photos of Frank, the blanket my mother had knitted for me, and the flower dress I was wearing. Everything else could stay in that house that had stopped being my home long before I realized it. When we reached the door, Juliet clung to my arm. "Mom, please, the kids will miss you. I'll miss you." I stopped and looked at her one last time. She was my daughter, the baby I had held in my arms, to whom I had sung lullabies, whom I had taught to walk, but she was also the woman who had allowed me to be treated like trash in her own home. "Juliet," I said with a deep sadness but also with a peace I hadn't felt in years, "if you really miss me, if the kids really miss you, learn from this. Learn that love isn't shown with pretty words, but with actions. And learn that it's never, ever too late to truly ask for forgiveness." I got into the taxi. Hope got in after me. And as we drove away from that house, I didn't look back. Because for the first time in 5 years, I was looking forward. The first few days at Hope's house in Pittsburgh were like waking from a nightmare that had lasted for years. Her house was small but full of light, with plants in every window and the smell of freshly brewed coffee that reminded me of our childhood. In the mornings, I'd wake up scared, expecting to hear the sound of a key turning, but I only heard the birds singing and my sister's voice making breakfast. "How did you sleep, sis?" she'd ask me every morning, and I didn't know how to explain that sleeping without fear was something I had forgotten existed. For 2 weeks, I thought I had truly escaped, that I could rebuild my life in Pittsburgh, help Hope with her small sewing business, meet the neighbors, become a normal person again. But family doesn't let you go that easily when you've been their source of convenience for so long. The first attack came by phone. It was Sebastian, my grandson, crying on the other end of the line. "Grandma, why did you leave?" he sobbed with a child's broken voice. "Mommy says you don't love us anymore, because we were bad to you." It broke my heart. I put the phone on speaker so Hope could hear, because I no longer wanted to face my daughter's manipulations alone. "My love, I love you more than life itself," I told him, my voice trembling. "I left because I needed to be in a place where I'm treated well, where no one locks me up. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. Then why don't you come back? Mommy says if you come back, everything will be different. That they'll change. That they'll take better care of you." Hope looked at me and shook her head. She had seen the state I arrived in, 20 pounds underweight, with bruises on my arms from being pushed around, with an anxiety that made me jump at any loud noise. "Sebastian, sweetie," I said. "Do you miss me?" "Yes, Grandma, a lot." "Then come visit me. Tell your mommy to bring you to Pittsburgh. We have a yard with pear trees, and your Aunt Hope makes the best apple pie in the whole state." There was a silence, and then I heard Juliet's voice in the background, whispering something to him. "Grandma," Sebastian said in a different voice, as if reciting something he'd been taught. Mommy says that if you really love us, you have to come back. She says a grandmother doesn't abandon her grandchildren. Those words hit me like a slap. After everything I had been through, after years of confinement and humiliation, now I was the one who was doing the abandoning. Put your mother on, I said with a calm I didn't feel. Hi, Mom. Juliet's voice sounded sweet, manipulative. Are you over your tantrum yet? Tantrum? I repeated, feeling anger begin to boil in my chest. You call 5 years of abuse a tantrum? Oh, Mom, don't exaggerate. I've talked to Ed, and we're willing to make changes. You can come back, and everything will be different. What kind of changes? Well, we won't lock you in so much, and we'll have dinner together on Sundays. And you can see the kids more often. Hope snatched the phone from me. Listen here, you ungrateful girl, she yelled at Juliet with the force she'd always had. Have you no shame? How dare you ask her to come back after how you treated her? Your sister arrived here malnourished, terrified like a ghost. Aunt Hope, you don't understand how things are. Mom is very delicate. She needs special care. Liar! Your mother is perfectly fine. What she needs is to be far away from you two, who treated her worse than an animal. If you don't bring her back, I'm coming to get her, Juliet threatened. And for the first time in weeks, I felt that familiar fear in my stomach. You come get her, Hope challenged. But you'll have to get through me first. And I promise you, you won't like what I have to say. She slammed the phone down so hard the receiver rattled. They're not coming for you, she said, hugging me. As long as I'm alive, no one is going to hurt you again. But I knew Juliet. I knew her stubbornness, her need for control. And most of all, I knew Ed. If they had decided I had to come back, they wouldn't give up easily. The second attack came 3 days later. This time, it was Sophia who called, but her voice sounded strange, as if she were reading. Grandma, I'm very sad you left. My tummy hurts from crying so much. The doctor says I'm going to get sick if you don't come back. What doctor, my love? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. The doctor who came to see me because I can't eat since you left. He says I have a sickness called... There was a pause, as if she were reading. Grandmother abandonment disorder. Hope and I looked at each other in horror. They were using my own grandchildren as emotional weapons, inventing illnesses to manipulate me. Sweetheart, can you put your mommy on the phone? Yes, Grandma, but please come back. I don't want to die of sadness. When Juliet took the phone, my voice came out like a roar. How dare you use your children like that? How dare you put those ideas in their heads? Mom, the kids really are very affected. Sophia hasn't eaten properly since you left. Sebastian is having nightmares. They need their grandmother. You're a liar. If they were really sick, you would have taken them to a real doctor, not invented fake diagnoses. How do you know they're fake? Are you a doctor? I know they're fake because I know you, Juliet. Because I know how you manipulate, how you lie, how you use your own children to get what you want. There was a long silence, and when she spoke again, her voice had lost all pretense of sweetness. Fine, Mom. You want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. If you're not back in 1 week, I will make sure you never see your grandchildren again for the rest of your life. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. I can keep the kids from you forever. I can move to another city, change my number, make you disappear from their lives completely. Is that what you want? Fear paralyzed me. Not for myself, but for Sebastian and Sophia. It wasn't their fault they had a manipulative mother. They truly loved me, and I loved them more than my own life. Give me time to think, I managed to say. You have 1 week. I couldn't sleep that night. Hope found me crying in the kitchen at 3 a.m. I can't lose my grandchildren, I told her. They're the only good thing I have left from that family. Sis, if you go back, you'll end up in a home or worse. You've seen what they're capable of. But if I don't go back, I'll never see Sebastian and Sophia grow up. I'll never be able to protect them from the same toxicity that destroyed me. Hope sat beside me and took my hands. You know what I think? I think there's a third option. One Juliet isn't expecting. What's that? That you fight back. That you don't give up. But you also don't go back to being their victim. That you get legal help. That you document everything they did to you. That you prove you are a competent grandmother who poses no danger to her grandchildren. Do you think that's possible? I think you're stronger than either of us ever imagined, including yourself. The next day, we went to see a lawyer who specialized in elder rights and family law. We told him the whole story, and he took careful notes. "Mrs. Miller," he said at the end, "you have rights. As a grandmother, you have a right to maintain a relationship with your grandchildren. And as a senior citizen, you have a right to live free from abuse. What they did to you constitutes domestic violence." But can I really do something legally? We can file for a visitation schedule with your grandchildren, and we can also file an abuse complaint. With the recorded calls your sister mentioned, and with witnesses who can corroborate your condition when you arrived in Pittsburgh, we have a strong case. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. How long would it take? A few months. But ma'am, I'm going to be honest. It will be a battle. Your daughter will fight. She will try to discredit you. She will use all the lies she has already invented about your mental state. And you think I can win? I think you deserve the chance to try. That night, I called Juliet. My voice sounded different, firmer, more determined. "Honey, I've made a decision. Are you coming back?" "No, but I'm also not going to let you keep me from my grandchildren. Tomorrow, my lawyer is filing a petition to establish visitation rights. And he's also filing a complaint for domestic elder abuse." There was a silence so long I thought she had hung up. "Mom, you can't be serious. I'm very serious. As serious as when you used to lock me in. As serious as when you denied me food. As serious as when your husband threatened me in my own room. No one is going to believe you. We'll see about that." And I hung up. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. The petition was filed on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, all of Ed's family, half of their neighborhood in Cleveland, and even some acquaintances in Pittsburgh already knew that the crazy mother-in-law was suing her own daughter. Juliet had launched a smear campaign I hadn't anticipated, but that my lawyer, Mr. Davies, had warned me about. "They're going to try to paint you as a senile, vengeful old woman," he had told me. "Be prepared for them to question everything. Your mental capacity, your motives, even your love for your grandchildren." What I didn't expect was the cruelty with which they would do it. The first blow came when I least expected it. Hope came back from the grocery store, her face pale, carrying the bags as if they weighed a ton. "Sis, I have to tell you something," she said, dropping the bags on the kitchen table. "But I don't want you to get upset. What happened?" "At the store, Mrs. Gallo, an old acquaintance who moved to Cleveland years ago, stopped me to ask about you. She says everyone in her neighborhood is talking about how you're suing Juliet because you lost your mind after Frank died." "What?" "She says Juliet is telling people that you make things up, that you accuse her of abuse when she was caring for you day and night, that you even threatened to harm yourself if they didn't give you money for your vices." I felt like a bucket of ice water had been thrown on me. Every word was a stab aimed exactly where it hurt most. My reputation, my sanity, my dignity. "Vices?" I repeated, incredulous. "What vices?" "She's saying you became a problem drinker after you were widowed. That's why they had to watch you so closely, to keep you from hurting yourself." I sat down heavily in a chair. The strategy was diabolical but perfect. Who would believe a senile alcoholic widow accusing her devoted daughter of abuse? Who would question the story of a respectable mother and wife who sacrificed her peace to care for a difficult old woman? But the worst was yet to come. 2 days later, as we were eating breakfast, the phone rang. It was a voice I didn't recognize at first. "Am I speaking with Eleanor Miller?" "Yes. Who is this?" "I'm a social worker with Adult Protective Services in Cleveland. My name is Letitia Vargas. We've received a report concerning you, and we need to verify a few things." My heart hammered in my chest. Hope came over and put the call on speaker. "What kind of report?" "We received a report that you are living in inadequate conditions, that you are possibly being manipulated by third parties into making false accusations against your family, and that you may be in danger due to cognitive decline." "That's a lie," I said, but my voice trembled. "Ma'am, I understand this is sensitive, but we need to conduct an in-person evaluation. Would you be available to meet with us tomorrow morning?" After we hung up, Hope and I sat in silence. The move was masterful. Not only had they questioned my version of events, but they had managed to get the very system that was supposed to protect me to investigate me instead. They're going to try to have me declared incompetent, I murmured. They won't succeed, Hope said with more conviction than she felt. You are perfectly fine. Anyone who talks to you for 5 minutes will realize that. But when the social workers arrived the next day, I realized they came with a preconceived notion. They were 2 young women who looked at me with that mix of pity and distrust reserved for troublesome seniors. Eleanor Miller, we're just going to ask you a few routine questions, said the one who introduced herself as Letitia. Do you know what day it is today? Friday, March 23rd. Who is the current president of the United States? Joe Biden. Do you recall why you are here in Pittsburgh? Because my daughter and her husband abused me for 5 years back in Cleveland, and I decided to leave that situation with my sister's help. The 2 workers exchanged a look. One of them scribbled something in her notebook. Mrs. Miller, we have spoken with your daughter, Juliet. She tells us a very different version of events. I imagine she does. She says you suffered from episodes of confusion, that sometimes you didn't recognize people, that you had trouble remembering if you had eaten or taken your medications. That is false. She also says that on several occasions, they found you trying to leave the house in your pajamas, disoriented, and that's why they had to take security measures. Also false. And she says you developed a dependence on alcohol that complicated your care. Completely false. You can run any test you like. The other social worker who had been silent finally spoke. Mrs. Miller, doesn't it seem strange to you that your own daughter, who raised you and has known you your whole life, would invent all these things? The question hit me like a punch, because she had a point. What mother could imagine her own daughter would be capable of inventing such cruel, elaborate lies? What signals had I given for it to be believable that I had become an alcoholic and senile? You know what? I said, rising from the chair with all the dignity I could muster. You're right. It is strange. Just as strange as a daughter allowing her mother to be threatened and locked up. Just as strange as denying food to the person who gave you life. Just as strange as using your own children to emotionally manipulate their grandmother. I'm not finished. Yes, it's strange. But life is full of strange and terrible things we prefer not to believe because they are too painful. You came here already convinced that I am the problem. You decided that a daughter cannot be capable of abusing her mother, because that would shatter your idea of how the world ought to work. Ma'am, we are just doing our job. Your job is to protect the vulnerable. But you decided the vulnerable one can't be me, because I'm old and because I'm accusing someone younger and more presentable. Hope stood up and came to my side. You want proof? She said to them. I have photos of how my sister arrived here. She was 20 pounds underweight. She had bruises on her arms. She was malnourished and terrified. Do those look like symptoms of senile dementia to you? They could be symptoms of self-neglect. Enough, I yelled, and my voice echoed through the house. You know what the saddest part of all this is? If I were an elderly man reporting abuse, you would believe me immediately. But because I'm an older woman accusing another woman, you automatically think I'm crazy or that I'm lying. The workers visibly shifted uncomfortably. I also want you to know, I continued, that I have recordings of the calls where my daughter used her children to emotionally blackmail me. I have witnesses to my condition when I arrived here, and I have a lawyer who is documenting every single one of your lies. Ma'am, what you're just doing is participating in the second victimization that elderly people suffer when they dare to report abuse. First, they are abused by their families. Then they are abused by the very institutions that are supposed to protect them. They left without completing their evaluation. But I knew the damage was done. In their reports, they would write that the woman was hostile and uncooperative, that she showed paranoid attitudes toward authorities. That night, I called Mr. Davies to tell him what had happened. It was expected, he said wearily. But don't worry, Eleanor. These cases always get worse before they get better. The defense always tries to shift attention from the actual abuse to the supposed incompetence of the victim. But are we going to win? We're going to fight, and we're going to prove that behind every one of their lies is a very clear motivation to prevent the truth about what they did to you from coming out. but there was something in his tone that worried me. Something that made me think this battle was going to be much longer and more painful than any of us had imagined. And I was right, because 3 days later, the bomb Juliet had been preparing arrived. The legal notification that would change everything. She was suing me, too. Not just for slander and defamation, but for something much worse. She was petitioning to have me legally declared incompetent and to be appointed as my legal guardian. If she won, I would officially become her prisoner again. But this time, with the sanction of the state. The countersuit notification arrived on a Monday morning, delivered by a nervous young man who could barely look me in the eye. When I read the words, Declaration of Legal Incompetency and Mandatory Guardianship, I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. But this time, something had changed in me. This time, I didn't collapse. "Hope," I said to my sister, who was reading over my shoulder. "Call Mr. Davies. Tell him we need to meet today." The lawyer arrived that afternoon with an expression that mixed concern and determination. "Eleanor, I won't lie to you. This is serious. If a judge determines you lack the capacity to make your own decisions, Juliet would have total control over your life, where you live, how your money is spent, who you can see, even what medical treatments you receive. What do we need to win? We need to prove 3 things: that you are completely lucid, that your daughter's accusations are false, and that she is the last person who should have control over your life. How? With independent psychological evaluations, testimony from people who know you now, and primarily, with your own strength in court. You are going to have to face her head-on and show the judge who you truly are." Over the following weeks, my life became constant preparation. Psychological evaluations, interviews with independent social workers, gathering testimonials. Dr. Williams, a geriatric specialist who examined me under court order, was surprised by my mental state. "Mrs. Miller, your cognitive abilities are completely intact. Your memory is excellent, your orientation is perfect, and you show a clear understanding of your legal and family situation. May I ask who initiated this incompetency evaluation process?" "My daughter, the same one who kept me locked up for 5 years. The doctor noted something in his file and shook his head. "It's regrettable, but I've seen similar cases. Sometimes families start these processes not because the senior is incapacitated, but because their lucidity has become inconvenient for them." People who knew me also came to testify. Mr. Russo made the trip from Cleveland specifically to give a statement. "Your Honor," he told the judge during a preliminary hearing, "I've known Eleanor for 30 years. She was a strong, hardworking, intelligent woman. When I tried to visit her at her daughter's house, they told me she was not in her right mind. But when I see her now, she's the same woman she's always been. The only difference is that now she has peace in her eyes instead of fear." Mrs. Chen from the corner store also testified. "The last time I saw Eleanor before she left for Pittsburgh, she was unrecognizable, thin, scared, dressed in dirty clothes. Her daughter told me she didn't even know how to dress herself anymore. But I knew her for years shopping at my store, and she was always impeccable and very sharp. Now that I see her again, she's back to her old self." But the most powerful testimony came from where I least expected it. Dr. Bennett, who had been Frank and my family doctor for over a decade, appeared voluntarily before the court. "Your Honor, I cared for Mrs. Miller and her family for many years. After her husband's death, she continued coming for regular checkups. She never showed signs of cognitive decline or alcohol problems. The last time I saw her was 2 years ago, when she came in with a large bruise on her arm. I asked her how she got it, and she said she fell. But now, knowing what I know, I believe I should have investigated further." Juliet also had to present her proof. She brought photographs that, according to her, showed my deterioration, images where I appeared in my robe and disheveled, which she had taken without my knowledge during my worst moments at her house. She brought witnesses who confirmed my supposed mental confusion, mainly Ed's relatives who barely knew me. But the cruelest test was when she brought my own grandchildren. On the day of the final hearing, when I walked into the courtroom and saw Sebastian and Sophia sitting next to Juliet, dressed formally and with confused, scared faces, my heart broke. They didn't understand why they were there, why their grandma and their mom were fighting in such a serious, cold place. Juliet looked different. She had lost weight, had deep circles under her eyes, and every time she looked at me, her eyes immediately darted away. Ed, sitting behind her, kept that arrogant expression I knew so well. But there was something nervous in the way he drummed his fingers on the table. When it was my turn to testify, I stood up straight and walked to the stand. The judge, an older man with a serious expression but kind eyes, asked me to tell my version of events. And then I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I told the complete truth, without fear, without apologies, without minimizing anything. I spoke of the confinement, the denied meals, Ed's nightly threats, how they isolated me from my grandchildren, the constant humiliation, the lies they invented about my mental health. I spoke in a clear voice, without crying, without dramatizing, just stating the facts with the serenity of someone who has nothing left to lose. When I finished, the judge asked me direct questions. "Mrs. Miller, do you understand the implications of this lawsuit?" "Perfectly, Your Honor. My daughter wants me declared incompetent so she can control my life, just as she controlled the last 5 years of it." "And what is your opinion of your daughter's accusations regarding your mental state?" "My opinion is that it's highly convenient that I suddenly developed mental problems right after I started reporting the abuse I received. And I believe that if I were truly as ill as she claims, I would not be here defending myself with such clarity. Do you have anything else to add?" I stood up and looked directly at Juliet. She finally held my gaze, and in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: shame. "Your Honor, I want to say that I loved that woman before she was born. I carried her in my womb. I nourished her with my body. I worked day and night to give her a better future. And if today she is here trying to take away my freedom, it is because I failed as a mother to teach her that true love does not control, it liberates. But I also want to say that I am no longer her victim. I found my voice and my strength, and regardless of what this court decides, I already won my freedom the day I decided I deserved something better." The judge deliberated for 2 hours that felt like years. When he returned to the courtroom, we were all in absolute silence. "After reviewing all the evidence presented," he said solemnly, "this court determines that Mrs. Eleanor Miller is in full control of her mental faculties. There is no justification to declare her legally incompetent. Furthermore," he continued, "a mandatory visitation schedule is ordered to allow Mrs. Miller to maintain regular contact with her grandchildren, and the district attorney's office is recommended to review the accusations of domestic elder abuse presented in this case." Hope hugged me, weeping. Mr. Davies smiled for the first time in weeks, and I simply breathed. I breathed like I hadn't in 5 years. When we left the courthouse, Juliet caught up to me on the steps. She was alone. Ed had slipped away through a side exit. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking, "forgive me. I forgave you a long time ago, honey," I replied. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it definitely doesn't mean coming back. Can I at least know where you'll be? For the visits with the kids? Mr. Davies will inform you of everything necessary." She walked away crestfallen, and for a moment, I felt pity for her. But then I remembered all the nights of fear, all the denied meals, all the humiliations, and the pity vanished. 2 months later, I moved into a small apartment in downtown Pittsburgh. It's not large, but it has huge windows that let the sun in all morning, and a balcony full of plants that I tend with the patience I used to dedicate to caring for people who didn't deserve it. The children visit me every 2 weeks. At first, they came tense, confused by everything that had happened, but little by little, they have relaxed. Now Sebastian tells me about his baseball team, and Sophia shows me the drawings she makes at school. The visits are supervised, but they are full of genuine laughter and hugs. Juliet hasn't come yet. Mr. Davies tells me she's in therapy, trying to understand how she could treat her own mother that way. Maybe someday she'll visit. Maybe not. It's no longer up to me. Because I learned something fundamental. You can't force anyone to love you correctly, but you can demand respect. And if they won't give it, you can walk away with your head held high. Every morning I wake up when I want, eat whatever I crave for breakfast, and go for a walk in the park without asking anyone for permission. It's a simple freedom, but after 5 years of confinement, every decision I make on my own feels like a miracle. Have you ever lived through something similar to what I've told you? Do you know anyone who has gone through a situation like this? I would really like you to tell me about it in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to the channel. I need this message to reach someone else who might need to hear it. It is never too late to reclaim your dignity.